We are live. Just testing to make sure that we actually can hear me and see me on YouTube and LinkedIn, everybody. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate you. Just making sure the sound and the video are working. StreamYard kind of has a delay, so we are testing this right now. All right. Dave Ward Extraordinaire says we are good to go. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me for questions and answers. This is where I'm going to give you some back pocket speaking strategies of the week. I'm Dr. Danny Brissell. I host well-crafted story workshops once a month with my co-conspirator, Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson. He's the good-looking one. I'm the one that kind of drags on in my answers. And so why don't we jump right into your questions this week? Question number one comes to us from Cynthia in Boca Raton, Florida. Cynthia writes, what role does body language play in improving communication skills during public speaking? Well, body language can make or break all of your communication skills. It conveys confidence, it reinforces your message, and it helps you connect with your audience on a deeper level. I mean, think about Steve Jobs on the old Apple product launches. I don't think anybody did it better than Steve Jobs. He was very deliberate about where he walked on the stage. He made sure to have eye contact with his audience during very important moments. And he knew the secret to the dramatic pause, that by pausing, sometimes it's that space in between words that's more powerful than the words themselves. Mark was somebody who attended one of our 2-day workshops, and he said that his past audiences, his speeches, they disengaged audiences, and he had really low sign-up rates for his business. And what he did, well, what we did with him was we just aligned Mark's message with his body. I mean, you can't be happy and you can't say you're happy and be looking like this, folks. You got to get your movements coordinated with the different things that you're trying to accomplish. Dynamic gestures convey enthusiasm. Being open actually builds up trust. Too many speakers, they hide behind podiums, and that's a major no-no. It's an instant barrier between you and your audience. You want to show that your audience that they can trust you, and you can do this together. I've always said that the best presentations, they start off with, this is my story. Now let's talk about your story, and together, let's work together and create our story. What you say and how you move must align. Thank you for that question, Cynthia. I'm trying to, Coach Jimmy, he's very brief with his answers. I usually go a little bit longer. I'm going to try and go briefer today. So we'll see. So thank you for joining us. Question number two comes to us from Simon or Simone in Bilbao, Spain. I'm trying to do my Spanish pronunciation. Simon or Simone, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. So the question is, how can storytelling help increase your communication skills and leadership presence? Well, when used effectively, it helps you convey complex ideas clearly. It helps you connect emotionally with your audience. And most importantly, it should be inspiring action with your audience. I think of, everybody knows Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is one of the most amazing speeches ever delivered. And it wasn't just, Martin Luther King didn't just deliver a list of facts or demands. He emotionally connected with his audience. He gave the audience a compelling story that painted a vivid picture of a vision for his future, the future that he wanted to envision. I believe that you need to replace information with inspiration, and that way you're going to get your audience to do implementation. See what I did there? I'm a former school teacher. I have to do things that are either alliteration or they rhyme. That's what I always do. I'll give you another example. Winston Churchill during World War II gave all kinds of amazing speeches. one of the best ones was the "We shall fight on the beaches" speech. It wasn't just a list of battle strategies. It was a stirring narrative of resistance. He got his people. He was trying to inspire determination, survival. Really, what was great was Churchill was trying to unite everybody. So it's us against them. If you really want to get your audience with you, you got to create an enemy and make it so we can fight the enemy together. Um, Churchill was just a master at using vivid imagery, and he used emotionally charged language. We shall never, we shall never. He would always do. Again, if you really want to get better at speaking, you got to watch lots of great speakers. Churchill is a great place to start. He's one of the most incredible speakers ever. Um, he would just inspire the British people to stand firm against the overwhelming odds of the Nazis. Again, because of Churchill, basically, he was able to persevere long enough for FDR to get America to join the war to help the Allies. That wouldn't have happened. I honestly think Churchill might be one of the most important people to walk the face of the earth in the 20th century. I mean, he had his faults, obviously. The older you get, all these people have their faults, but his strengths where he really inspired a country. He was a dynamic speaker, and he was funny. I like funny speakers as well. This is the core strength of storytelling. It transforms abstract ideas into relatable human experiences. And this is the most important thing that you're trying to do in your speech, is to connect to your audience. That's why you shouldn't be using fancy words to sound smarter to your audience. You need to be able to relate to your audience, use the language that they use. Michael, who just attended one of our seminars a couple of months ago, he said that because of the 2-day seminar, he was able to learn to structure and position his message in a way that works. So by doing that, it helps your listeners, it helps your audience easily follow the narrative and absorb the message. David, who worked with us last summer and gave us an incredible testimonial, but I remember he said that after attending the 2-day well-crafted story workshop, it helped him communicate what he does in a way that serves people well. And that was the key word, serves. Is the best speakers, they're not selling, they're serving. Because, and Jimmy and I are very adamant about this, whether your audience decides to do business with you or not, you have a responsibility to serve them in the time that they've allotted for you. They've given you their most precious asset, their time. So come from a service mindset, not a sales mindset. When you focus on stories that resonate with your audience's experience, it shows that you understand their problems, that you're invested in helping them. And this is always going to build trust and respect. And that's what you're trying to do to connect with your audience. Hopefully, I answered that extensively, but not as extensive as normal. Next question comes to us from Bart in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Bart, thank you for your question. Bart writes, here's the question. What are actionable strategies to improve communication skills for public speaking success? Well, there's a lot of different strategies. The first one that I would talk about is clarity. You need to structure your message clearly. If you ever watch former President Barack Obama, he always has a 3-part structure to his presentations. He introduces the problem, he discusses the solution, and then he motivates his audience to take action. And he's very deliberate in the way he speaks. David, again, I remember one of the things he said after attending our workshop. He said that he left with a clear, actionable framework for his presentation. So having that, and that's, if you go to freestoryguide.com, we offer that blueprint for you. So make sure you go to freestoryguide.com. It'll help you out on, again, I always tell people, I don't know how to bake chocolate chip cookies, but if you gave me a recipe on how to bake chocolate chip cookies and I followed the recipe, I believe I could make pretty decent chocolate chip cookies. The same thing with your speech. You might not know how to craft a well-crafted speech, but if you go to freestoryguide.com and use the blueprint that we provided for you, you're going to create a pretty darn good speech. Another thing that you need to do, we just addressed this earlier, is use body language to reinforce your message. Tony Robbins, we've worked with Tony's people many times. Tony Robbins is a motivational speaker, and he's so motivating because he uses his body. He has lots of energy. He's, first of all, he's a giant to begin with, but he's always high energy, and the audience becomes exactly the way he is because he has that energy. When I was a school teacher, I used to ask my colleagues, I'm like, why are my students so hyperactive? Well, it's because I'm hyperactive, and your audience feels your energy. If you get out there and tell the sad talk, everybody's going to feel that energy. So this is why your body movements are key. Obviously you need to practice your emotional connection through storytelling. People remember stories. That's why we're always talking about this. Oprah. I love watching Oprah. The reason people love Oprah is she's so vulnerable all the time. I've always battled weight my entire life, and so did Oprah. I mean, some shows she's a little bit larger than others, and she shares her struggles with having a better diet and dropping that weight. And people in her audience love her for it because she's vulnerable. She's connecting to them by sharing her own vulnerabilities. You have to adapt your voice for maximum impact. And so you need to vary your tone and your pace and your volume. We recently lost James Earl Jones, and I could listen to James Earl Jones all day long. He had a very deep voice. He never squeaked or anything. But when he wanted to be very serious, he spoke very slowly, and he'd speak very quickly when he was feeling a little bit lighthearted. That's how he's controlling the pace of his speech. If you want to get better, you always have to rehearse. I mean, the best people are constantly rehearsing. Jerry Seinfeld, one of the best comedians out there, people are always amazed at how funny he is and how great his jokes are. He practices harder than anybody. Before you ever see him on some tour, he's gone to every little nightclub in New York City and Los Angeles to small crowds of 12 to 15 people. I was actually just in New York City, and a friend of mine, he saw Jerry Seinfeld the other night. He was practicing new jokes because that's how he gets better, is he wants to practice his pacing. And this is what you should be doing in your presentation, is practice your presentation as much as possible. Practice makes permanent. So you're going to get a lot better at speaking if you practice. Again, I believe in pauses. I think pauses are great. Steve Jobs is a great business example. President Obama, when he speaks, he has a lot of pauses, and it adds to his credibility. I mean, my favorite pause of all time is the movie Blazing Saddles. If you ever see the movie Blazing Saddles, there's a great scene where Cleavon Little is the black cowboy and Gene Wilder is his white prisoner. And Cleavon Little looks at Gene Wilder. He's like, "I am your host and you are my guest. So what do you like to do?" And Gene Wilder basically says, "Play chess, make love." Well, let's play chess. It's that dramatic pause that Cleavon Little, that's where the big laugh is that he paused. So a lot of people, they miss out on that opportunity, but sometimes you don't need the words to make the message stand. You get that dramatic pause. And really the most important thing that you can do this is a very important strategy to improve your communication skills, is you got to practice your vulnerability. Again, Jimmy and I always tell people this: don't share your successes with your audience, share your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you share your own personal failures and how you overcame them, the more you're going to get your audience behind you. So hopefully, I don't know how many different suggestions that was, but that was a whole bunch of suggestions, concrete suggestions on ways you can improve your communication skills for your public speaking success. All right, I think I have time for one more question. So we're going to go for, let's look at all right. So Derek in Seattle, Washington. Derek, thank you for your question. Here's the question. How do communication skills and storytelling enhance public speaking and build leadership? Well, communication skills enhance your clarity and your authority with your audiences. Simon Sinek is a wonderful speaker. He wrote Start with Whys. He's written a lot of books, but that's the one I like the most. So Simon Sinek, he always captivates his audiences because he's British, and he communicates these complex ideas by presenting them in simple, clear language. Even though he's a very educated person, he doesn't speak above his audience. He speaks in terms that his audience can understand. Albert Einstein was a great example of that. Einstein, I think the reason he was so brilliant as a scientist and as a humanitarian was because he'd take these complex ideas, but he would phrase them in ways that general audiences, people like me, could actually understand what he was saying. Cynic, again, the way he's able to explain the why behind actions, it resonates deeply with audiences, and it makes his message a lot more influential. Storytelling, it creates emotional connections. I always point this out. Of all people, it was Stalin who said, "A million dead is a statistic, one dead is a tragedy." Translation: facts tell, stories sell. Give you an example. Jimmy and I, a couple of weeks ago, were working with a gentleman named Richard. Richard is a financial advisor, very successful financial advisor. And his speech, he began by listing off all of his accomplishments, 30 years in the industry, made over $1 billion for his clients, named all the VIPs, the name famous people he's worked with. That's great. He's definitely demonstrated his credentials, but he's created a barrier between him and his audience. His audience doesn't think that they're worthy of his time. And so in the 2-day workshop, we worked with Richard and we changed his opening. And so now Richard, rather than bragging about all of his accomplishments, he starts by talking about the very first client he ever got. And it's just this hilarious one catastrophe after another, all these mistakes. And he noticed about a week later, Richard was doing this dinner seminar. He got like 15 people to steak restaurants, free steak dinner to invest in his retirement services. And this was what Richard said. He said, he told Jimmy and me, he's like, "Guys, I used to see my audiences were like this. And since I changed that story, instead of crossing their arms and looking serious, now they're patting their hands on their laps laughing because they feel my pain as I go through this horrible story." And so that's the power of connecting. That's the most important thing that you should be doing in a speech is, what am I doing to connect with my audience? Storytelling should inspire action. Steve Jobs, again, I'm sorry that I'd love to give Steve Jobs an example, but during his Apple product launches, he didn't just list the features of the Apple products. He always told the story of how these products were going to change lives. I mean, when I read his biography by Walter Isaacson, he would yell at his engineers. He's like, "You got to make this quicker." He's like, "Because if it takes a second and we sell like 5 million of these things, that's 5 million seconds, which equates to how many days and how many years and stuff. And like average person lives this long. And so basically you're saving 6.5 lives if you can just get this to be quicker." And he got people to enroll in his vision. He was just a great communicator. And communication and story building, that's what they do. They build trust. People like routines. If you don't think you're a creature of habit, take a different route back from work tonight. People are a creature of habit. The reason we want to tell stories, we need to build the trust. People go to McDonald's not because it's the best restaurant, but because they know what they're going to get. And that's what you're trying to establish as a speaker is, hey, when you see me, like Jimmy and I, we want people to trust us because we're like, hey, we're not going to have you tell all these sad stories. We're going to do positive, uplifting stories. And this isn't about selling. This is about serving your audience. And if we can ingrain those thoughts into our audiences, we're doing our job. And most importantly, effective communication, it drives your leadership vision. I always think of President Kennedy, his speech in the 60s, where he said, by the end of this decade, we will send a man to the moon and return him safely. He gave everybody a vision that they wanted to get behind. So again, the question was, how do communication skills and storytelling enhance public speaking and build leadership? So hopefully I gave you some really good answers that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So again, everybody, we're going to do this once a week. Jimmy's tomorrow, I'm today. But I hope I was able to answer some of your questions. Keep on sending those to the Well Crafted Workshop page here on LinkedIn, or you can comment on YouTube, and we'll make sure to address your questions in the future. Until next time, remember, you're just a well-crafted story away from 7 figures. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Take care. God bless.